And welcome back to Daily Wrap. The New York Times published a hard-hitting op-ed piece Saturday arguing that Pope Francis is plotting to change Catholicism. According to the op-ed's author, his name is Ross Douthat, Pope Francis is working hard to push through a liberal proposal to let divorced and remarried Catholics receive communion before they get an annulment, and he even has an advisory body assembled to approve the controversial proposal. Okay, so joining us now in studio is Rick Henshaw. He's the Director of Communications for the Catholic League. Okay, so conservative Catholics are worried that the proposal does much more than simply allow divorced Catholics to receive communion, but actually that it rewrites Catholic doctrine. Does the Pope have the power to change doctrine?
No, the Pope doesn't have the power to change doctrine, and it seems, reading that column, it seemed to, be very conspiratorial in nature. The Pope clearly wants this synod to be a healthy discussion. It seems that the Pope knows that there are these differences among different Catholics throughout the world, and he wants to bring it all out. He wants to have it discussed. But if you remember what he did before the synod, before he came here, on this whole question, he streamlined the annulment process. That seemed to be his message, that that's what the Church could legitimately do here. It could take these areas where a Catholic has a legitimate application for nullity, where a marriage never really met the Catholic standard for marriage and it can be annulled, and he's trying to make it easier to do that. That seemed to be his preemptive message, knowing that you cannot change Church teachings on the indissolubility of marriage. And so beyond that, to say that Catholics who divorce and remarry outside the Church without a finding of nullity would be eligible for the sacraments, it seems unquestionable that he's not going to do that.
It's really interesting you said it the way you said it, Rick, because I got the same. I'm not a Catholic, but in reading Ross's article, I thought precisely what you just said. Boy, this is conspiratorial, and this Pope does not strike me as the conspiratorial type. He didn't convene the synod last year and then suddenly come out and say, this is what we're going to do. So why are there people who why are there people looking to shoot this Pope down at every turn?
Well, yeah, it's kind of a hard thing. I think there are people who are trying to co-opt this Pope to a particular agenda. So those who we would call dissenter or progressive reformist Catholics are trying to co-opt everything the Pope says to that agenda. He says something about being Christian and compassionate and welcoming toward people with same-sex attraction, and they take that and run with it. Say he's going to change church teaching, he's going to permit gay marriage. On the other side, conservative Catholics, I think, taking the bait and reacting in a panic on everything. He has an approach that's very pastoral. He wants to be inclusive, but within the teachings of the Church. The whole question of forgiveness for those who have abortions, there's nothing new in that, but again, because of a situation like that, it was always required that the bishop pass on absolution in those cases. But many countries, like the United States, the bishop had already devolved that. The bishops had devolved it to priests. The Pope is just trying to make it universal in the year of mercy to emphasize that part of Catholic teaching, that nothing is unforgivable. It doesn't lessen the seriousness of certain sins, but nothing is unforgivable. That's what it seems to us he's trying to do, and everybody needs to just calm down.
My wife, who is the most Catholic person that you've never met, reacted to this article with 3 words. Popes don't plot. They don't do that.
There are plots against popes.
There are plots against popes, but popes don't plot. And that being said, we had a very interesting conversation about this. She said there's a big difference between canon law and doctrine and faith. My problem with Mr. Douthat's article is he seems to confuse those and conflict those, church can change canon law. And there are plenty of examples of it throughout history. They meat on Fridays. We're going to eat fish on Fridays. Changing whether priests can get married or not, which happened in the 12th century. Those kinds of things are changeable. Those kinds of things happen. But when we talk about articles of faith or discipline, those aren't, right?
That's absolutely correct. And so something like marriage, the true definition of marriage and the permanence of marriage, as Jesus taught, he went further than the Pharisees at the time, who did permit divorce, and he said it's not permissible. Marriage is permanent, and so on things like that. You're right. That's church doctrine that is not changeable, and you're absolutely correct, and your wife is absolutely correct. Popes don't plot. I do think again that Pope Francis wants to draw out the different discussion here, get everything out in the open. And then
the
I
truth
think
is he doesn't have to plot either. He's got the chair of St. Peter, so he really doesn't have to plot.
Right. Exactly.
Well,
That's
Rick
right.
Henshaw, Director for the Communications for the Catholic League, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank
we really
you so
appreciate
much.
your input. Okay, so what do you think of the New York Times op-ed on Pope Francis? Go to newsmaxtv.com/comments, newsmaxtv.com/comments. Let us know. Coming up next, we're going to read some of your viewer comments. Always interesting. Stick around.